Thank goodness,
Where am I?
it worked. Welcome, Redhead
Who
Neil
said
to
it?
this reality. I'm Core, the digital assistant and captain of this shuttle. Now go ahead and read the
This
prompter.
thing.
Yes, on your left.
Okay. Was Spidey's newest adventure worthy of the trilogy? Or was it an interdimensional mess? Well, let's go see. Thwip? What? Why am I here? I don't understand. What's going on?
A few moments later.
No way, really? Well, you're quite mental, Core, I must say. You're quite a rapscallion.
Thanks. It's already recording for you.
Hi, I'm Redhead Neil, and today we're going to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. Once again, Spider-Man No Way Home is told through the eyes of director John Watts, and screenwriters joining the team once again like they did for the other MCU Spider-Man era films is Eric Summers and Chris McKenna, which interesting enough wrote for Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, the Lego Batman movie, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Community, which is quite stellar work there, I must say. So Spider-Man No Way Home is a direct continuation of Spider-Man Far From Home, where Spider-Man's identity has been leaked by Mysterio and played all over Times Square and online. But luckily for Spider-Man, he is exonerated of all the charges against him while on a school trip, which saw most of the European buildings and people's life in shambles and in ruin. But unfortunately now Spider-Man must sit idly by while people close to him are getting hurt by the mere proximity of his wall-crawling escapades. But the final straw came when Peter and his friends' future is in complete disarray after their final application to attend MIT is summarily revoked, which caused Peter Parker to think of his other Avenger colleague he knows, which can help set things right. But as luck would have it, with Peter Parker's indecisiveness about who must know and who must not know about his secret identity, while Doctor Strange is weaving a complex spell, caused the spell to become unstable for a moment and lose somewhat control, which caused Doctor Strange to get a grasp on it once again and locked it away in a box called a La Machina de Cadaver's box, in order to be contained. And it's at this moment where Doctor Strange are quite fed up with Peter Parker's childish attitude to circumstances, where he didn't even think of alternate ways to help the admission professor to introduce them and his friends into MIT. But a few moments later, they suddenly realized that with the spells being unstable for that amount of time, caused people that know Spider-Man's identity from alternate universes to be pulled into their universe, which we call, say it with me, Core,
Earth 199999.
Yes. And after they capture these beings, the ultimate decision of how to send them back comes up, which caused quite a feud between Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, where Doctor Strange wants to send them back in their ultimate doom, where they died, where Spider-Man wants to send them back healed from their ailments, with the hopes of helping them and the alternate Spider-Mans from any agony, pain, and ends with Doctor Strange being trapped in a multiverse by Spider-Man's webbing, and Spider-Man escaping with both the alternate beings and the La Machina de Cadaver's box. But while as Peter Parker is trying to heal these beings from their ailment, is when suddenly Norman Osborn's the Green Goblin alternate takes hold and sweeps up Electro, Sandman and Lizard in using their powers for their own goal and not seeing it as a disease, which caused them to fight for Spider-Man, and quite in a bad spot, I have to say, Spider-Man ends up being, and this is when Spider-Man comes to the hard realization that not everybody can be saved, and on top of that, the unfortunate passing of Aunt May even drives home that train of thought harder. After he and his friends are reunited once again, they introduce him to alternate versions or variants of Spider-Man, being appeared by Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, who played Spider-Man in the early 2000s and 2010s separately, and with their combined help, they finalized the final antidote serum and gadgets to help send these beings back to their human form before everything else went awry. Okay. But luckily at first they succeed, but not before Norman Osborn, or Green Goblin, decided to break the La Machina de Cadavers box, which sent the spell going haywire and start fracturing the reality as we know it. This is when Peter Parker comes up with the ultimate decision to have everybody forget he exists, even Doctor Strange and his friends, with no exception of caveats to the rule. Everybody must forget Peter Parker's identity to Spider-Man, which ends quite somberly, I must say, the film, with Spider-Man being living now in a small one-bedroom apartment with a homemade costume he made. And now, for the most important part, I would give this film a drumroll please, a 17 out of 20. And I will tell you now why. Let's start with the good points. Firstly, I'm glad they didn't over-explain the multiverse complications or complex terminology that we must know, because I was afraid, seeing as this film is the beginning of the shattering of the universe, of expanding the MCU, I was quite afraid they're gonna give us a hard line and terminology and stuff that we must know about who can be introduced in the alternate timelines, or who can be pulled in and who cannot. So I'm quite glad I did just superficially and stuff happened, more or less. Where I feel like in Loki we did have some visual representation about what happens and alternate universes and times and stuff like that. But I feel with this film, I'm glad it didn't hunker too much down on the exposition or visual representation for us that could have made us delve too much deep into, but if this can happen, what about this? So I'm glad they kept it just normal and simple. Secondly, the special effects, once again, for the MCU branded association with film, is good. Once again, I'm glad they kept most of the alternate beings like Sandman, Lizard, everything the same as if they were pulled out from the other films. So I think that was quite nice to see. Thirdly would be, I like the more Peter and MJ relationship we got in the film, although it's not like the Tobey Maguire and MJ relationship in 1 and 2, I think, which they had more of a relationship through line. But it was quite nice to see them caring for one another and helping and being there for one another. So that was quite nice to see. Fourthly would be, I like the Ned being magically inclined. Seeing as he did previously talk to Doctor Strange about his grandma who mentioned that his family could be magically inclined, and him finally using the sling ring to call forth these Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. So I think it was quite a nice touch, and quite, if you think it, he's quite in line to be a student of the Carmontage for training and using his more magical side. Then fifthly would be the three Spider-Man's connection and interaction with each other. Quite nice to see. I'm glad they did the whole brotherly bond they have, and also mentioned how Tobey Maguire's web fluid can never run out because it's ingrained in him, where the other two would have to make their fake webbing. So it was quite nice to see. And also I like the fact that I had time to reflect on previous actions and movies they did, which they wish they handled differently or interacted in a different way than which it ultimately ended up in. So it was quite nice to see them reflecting and connecting with one another. Quite nice to see. Okay. Which would go into my sixth point, which is I like Andrew Garfield's redemption in this film, where he saves this version of MJ after she fell from the Statue of Liberty. So I think it was quite nice touch, seeing as in the second film he just missed his MJ for a few moments, which caused her death when she fell from the clock tower. So I think that was quite nice and a redemption for him. Then lastly, the Matt Murdock scene or cameo, was quite happy with it. Glad also that they didn't hunker down on why he's here and how he's here and does he have his practice, does he not, what does this mean for the Daredevil series which Netflix produced, how does this intertwine with Marvel's stuff. So I'm glad they just had him here and there, and suddenly all Spider-Man's exonerated of his charges. But good luck, Happy Hogan, you're gonna have a whole fight on you waiting in the justice system. So that was quite nice to see. And now for the bad points. Seeing as they are juggling multiple characters, and of course there's some that's gonna suffer. I think the person that suffered the most here was Sandman. Seeing as his heel turn at the end didn't make quite sense, because he was the one always talking about he needs to get back to his daughter, he needs to get back. But even though he do know that Norman Osborn and Lizard and Electro don't want to go back to their own universes, they want to exploit the one they already have. Or pulled in, so that didn't make quite sense for me. Where I feel if they had a few lines of why he's thinking that way, or why he decided to join the evil team, if I can say, I think that was just lackluster. That something just didn't make for me. It didn't bridge that gap from loving father to okay, let's fight with Spider-Man, both at the apartment and at the Statue of Liberty. So that didn't work for me. Secondly, the whole Aunt May being the center of Peter Parker's goodness, and always have to fight for the good, didn't make quite sense. I always saw her more of a legal guardian for him, taking care of him, and stuff like that. I never bridged that gap of or get that notion from her. So suddenly when Norman Osborn gets to her and she tells him to always help people, it feel quite out of place for me. That could be that I'm missing something, I cannot say. And even a death scene with the incorporation of the Ben Parker line just felt a bit out of place for me. And yeah, that whole sequence just didn't gel for me. I don't know why. It could be me. I know she did start that food bank, which we only saw a few snippets in Far From Home and stuff like that, but I never saw the whole fight for the good, be the goodness, stuff like that from her, which I thought was more of the Iron Man. The Iron Man was more of a center, or helping him to define what's good and what's not. So that was a bit odd. Thirdly, for me was the end credit scene, which wasn't basically an end credit scene. It was more a teaser for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which I feel, if you're going to watch Spider-Man No Way Home, of course you're going to watch Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, seeing as Kevin Feige and the others did say that these two films are interconnected in some way, as they do start branding or making the MCU a bit larger with the introduction of the multiverse. So I feel it was quite nonsensical to do that, because you're going to see it, you're going to see the other one. There's no either or. And then fourthly, I know the whole Sony and Marvel debate, which they can add and which characters they can't and stuff like that. But I feel like the whole Venom post-credit scene was quite a bit of a backhanded compliment for us Eddie Brock fans, where ultimately it felt like, yes, Eddie Brock is gone, keep it on your side of your play box, and we'll keep the symbiote in our sandbox to play with later. That's it. So it felt a bit odd and a bit weird. I know they introduced the notion in the Carnage film, the Venom vs. Carnage, but it just felt a bit odd and stand-outish here, which I feel like, Marvel's going to do what Marvel's going to do, who can complain. And then lastly, the somber ending we got for Spider-Man No Way Home, I feel like this was quite a somber affair, because normally the MCU films end, some of them do end somberly, but we normally get an idea where we can expect these characters, where the possibility is for the next film to go. But this one ends so somberly. We know he lives alone and he has his homemade costume and he's fighting crime, but there's nothing else we can pull from that can say, well, oh, we can expect him in this film or this project coming soon or stuff like that. So he's quite up in the air for me, so it makes me a bit disconcerting. So we will have to wait and see when that possibility of Spider-Man 4 or a possible cameo he could appear in, but as it is, it's quite jarring to see him just being up in the air, where I feel like he's such a central character that we can't just leave him to be. So yes, that was my thoughts on the film. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, do all that fancy stuff. And until next time, see you on the flip side. Cool, we need to talk about the difference. Many worlds in theory.